What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Connecticut, live, as always, for the History of series. And it's always exciting. So today we're going to be doing the history of the Toronto Blue Jays MLB franchise. Full disclosure, yes, I am aware that the thumbnail is going to be two different logos. For whatever reason, the Toronto Blue Jays logos were very difficult to find a you know image that I could use without getting a copyright claim. So that's why we have the two different logos there. It's the original logo from, when they were expansion team to the modern logo. Just something I definitely wanted to point out. Also, you'll notice to the right of me here, I do have a curtain up now, so the sunlight won't be in my face anymore, which is a lot neater. I can do more recordings like this, which I'm always happy to do. Um, yeah, but without further ado, we'll jump into this video here and it's going to be interesting. There will be a little bit of like a history part of it, but of course, you'll see a lot of stuff with the Blue Jays here. It's going to be exciting. So basically, Toronto Blue Jays are one of the younger franchises in the major leagues, of course. So basically, the city of Toronto had wanted a team for a little while. In early 1976, the team was actually pretty close to getting a team. They almost got the San Francisco Giants to relocate to the city of Toronto. Now, a U.S. court ended up denying that sale because they said, no, we don't want a team going to Canada. We don't want to lose one of our teams to Canada. This team has a lot of history in the United States. Obviously, New York Giants. We'll get to that at some point. But New York Giants moved San Francisco. So you got a long history in the American League. And Toronto basically said, okay, fine, we're going to have to look elsewhere. So later that year, Major League Baseball decided that they wanted to expand again. And when they said they wanted to expand, they ended up granting two expansion teams, I should say, one to Seattle and one to Toronto. So this very much upset U.S. President Gerald Ford, who had been fighting for an expansion, fighting for a Washington-based baseball team for a while at this point, as the second breach of the U.S. of the Washington Senators had recently at this point left the city of Washington without a team. They had left after the 71 season. So, it was embarrassing to Gerald Ford that his capital city didn't have a baseball team. So he really tried to pressure Major League Baseball into giving the Blue Jays expansion team to Washington instead of Toronto. However, the Major League said, okay, we don't really care. We're not going to bow to your pressure. Just because you're the U.S. president doesn't mean we have to respect and listen to everything that you say. So what ends up happening is the team goes to Toronto as planned, and the team would play its games originally at the Exhibition Stadium in obviously Toronto. Now they would play their first ever game April 7th, 1977, and this game was against the Chicago White Sox. Now, one of the big fears of having an expansion team in Toronto was snowstorms, and their first ever game kind of proved that true because they did play through a minor snowstorm. So, and the Blue Jays end up winning. So it's just a little interesting fact that their first ever game was played during a snowstorm. So then, before the 1978 season, the team would acquire outfielder John Mayberry, and he would become arguably the biggest name for the team at that point in time. And in the 1970s, though, like even with Mayberry, the team just didn't really succeed. Obviously, it's hard to do as an expansion franchise. So they never hit the 60 win mark in the 1970s. Now they finished with more than 100 losses in each season, which is fine. I mean, 3 years, you're an expansion franchise, you're not going to do amazing. You can't expect an expansion team to do what the Golden Knights did, for example, in the NHL, kick butt and make the finals in their first year. It doesn't happen. Now, every one of these 3 seasons, they did finish last in the AL East. Again, it's expected. You're an expansion franchise. So in the 1970s, the team had no pennants. So now we get to the 1980s, and in the year 1980, the team actually started off pretty well, but then in the summer, they just tumbled and they fell out of contention pretty quickly. And this was the first time that the team did not lose 100 plus games in a single season. So it's a bit of a positive. Now, during the 1982 season, the Blue Jays would hire a familiar manager in Bobby Cox, And the team ended up doing pretty good. They had their best record to date at that point, going 78 and 84. Now, after the season, outfielder John Mayberry would leave the team, so the team again was a bunch of people that weren't necessarily the most well known players. And in 1983, despite the fact that they lost Mayberry, who again was their best player at the time, the team finished above 500. And this was the first time ever that they finished above 500. Pretty impressive. And this began like a very strong stretch of Toronto baseball. So in mid 1985, relief pitcher Tom Henke joins the team, and the team finishes 99 and 62, which is their franchise record for wins in a single season. And they would go to the ALCS, where they would play the Kansas City Royals, and they would lose to the Kansas City Royals in the ALCS. Now, after this season, Bobby Cox would end up leaving the team, which kind of hurt the team. He's a great manager, obviously. And the team ends up playing well from 1986 to 1988, but they didn't make the playoffs. They weren't good enough. The loss of Bobby Cox definitely hurt the team. And in mid 1989, the Blue Jays would actually move to their new stadium, which was called the Sky Dome. And this is the stadium that they play in to date. They renamed it from Sky Dome to Rogers Center. Obviously, a company bought the rights to name the stadium. And the Blue Jays would actually, in 1989, win the AL East, but just like they had 4 years prior, they would lose in the ALCS, unfortunately for them. So at this point in the 1980s, the team is getting really competitive. So they've won the AL East two times in the past 5 years, and they're ready to play. They're ready to compete. They want something. They're hungry. They want to compete, and they did not win any pennants in the 80s, but it doesn't matter because they're getting ready. They're an expansion team still at this point. So now we get to the 90s, and the 1990 season, it was okay. They finished second in the AL East, but then they decided to make some moves. So before the 91 season, the team finally started to acquire some names that we recognize to date. One of those players would be outfielder Devin White, and another would be second baseman Roberto Alomar. So the team was getting some offensive names, which is always good. You want those to get fans come to the stands because if you are a dominant pitching team, people don't necessarily want to go to your games. If you hit homers, people will go to your games. So the team would win the AL East in 1991, but for the third time in their short history, they lost in the ALCS. Now, the Blue Jays would become the first Major League Baseball team, and this is interesting, the first MLB team ever to draw over 4 million fans in a single season, and that was, of course, the 1991 season. It goes to show you, yes, baseball's been growing big time, but they were the first team to ever draw over 4 million fans to a single season. That's pretty impressive. So you can tell the fans are getting excited, and they had a lot to be excited about. So they would sign starting pitcher Jack Morris and outfielder Dave Winfield to smaller contracts. At this point, they're both veterans that aren't as good as they were. And 1992, the Blue Jays would win the American League East again, and for the first time in their fourth try, they win the AL pennant. They finally get to pass the ALCS, which puts them in the World Series against the 90s dynasty of the Atlanta Braves. And they actually pull off the upset over Atlanta, winning the series, which gives Toronto its first ever championship when it comes to baseball. And they were very happy about this. Now, Tom Henke ends up leaving the team, as does Dave Winfield. They're both, Winfield's just on a 1 year deal anyway. Henke ends up just walking. And the team continues their success in 1993. So, yet again, they end up winning the American League East. They go in the ALCS again and they win it, which puts them in the World Series yet again. This time, they're matched up against the Braves division rival, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Blue Jays would win this series as well. So at this point, the Braves have won two consecutive back-to-back World Series. And if you want to, there's a lot of YouTube videos that you can see where you can see the game-winning hit. It was a pretty solid homer. Obviously, as a Phillies fan, it hurts to see it, but at the same time, I wasn't alive in '93, so it doesn't really affect me. Um, so what ends up happening after the '93 is Jack Morris leaves the team, and the team starts to struggle in '94. And then, as we know, the 1994 season ends with a player strike, which really upset a lot of baseball fans because that was the one year the Montreal Expos looked good. And Canadian fans were going crazy. It's like, oh my gosh, Toronto's doing really good. They're back to back World Series champs. And now Montreal's looking good while Toronto's kind of slipping down. So it is what it is. It was kind of a blessing in disguise for Toronto because they didn't need to defend their title. But so the team would end up struggling to draw a crowd through the rest of the decade. And this is in part because a lot of their bigger names are starting to leave, obviously. And the team would struggle on the field. And this was mostly after the strike shortened season because the team was getting all these older veterans that stepped in, and veterans decline. It's just a fact of life. That's what happens with these guys. They get older, they stop playing well. Now, in 98 and 99, so the last two seasons in the 90s, the team does well, but they're not good enough to make the playoffs. So they're competitive, but they're not playoff worthy. So in the 90s, the team has won a pair of AL pennants and they won the World Series both times they made it, which of course are the 1992 and the 1993 World Series. So now we get to the turn of the millennium, we get to 2000. And the 2000 season was similar to the 99-98 seasons where the team was good, but they weren't good enough to make the playoffs. So after the 2000 season, things would begin to change and not necessarily for the better. So the new owners would purchase the team after the season, and they had to begin to slash payroll. Now at this point in time, the Canadian dollar was not doing strong. It was really weak, and the Canadian dollar was the exchange rate from the Canadian dollar to the American dollar, U.S. dollar, was not good. So this really hurt management because, of course, you're in Canada. So let's just say you're sitting here, you're a player, you're offered $10 million to go to of Canadian dollars to play for Toronto, or $10 million to play for Boston, for example. You're going to go to Boston because the $10 million American is much more than $10 million Canadian. I don't know the exact conversion rate at that time, but it was tough. So the Blue Jays would have to offer, let's just say, $20 million of their money to get a player who's worth $10 million to every other team. So it hurt the team big time. So the other thing that really, really hurt them was the fact that the profits that they got, like the owners got, were in Canadian dollars, while the players were paid in US dollars. But remember, the ownership has the Canadian dollars, so they have to exchange it. So to them, $10 million to pay a guy in US dollars is really $20 million to them because they're based in Canada. It just got to be a real mess, and it really hurt the team. Now, as the Canadian dollar would begin to rebound, the team would begin to succeed again. But what ends up happening in the early 2000s is the team has to start making moves and calling up prospects and everything like that because they don't have the power or ability to do anything like that. So the team ends up being really up and down through the 2000s. There's not too much to talk about for the 2000s just because the team wasn't that great. So they did not make the playoffs in the whole decade of the 2000s just because the AL East was so dominant. Obviously, we saw the Red Sox win two World Series in this decade. We saw the Yankees win two World Series in this decade. We saw the Rays make the World Series once. We saw the Yankees make the World Series one other time. So there's six World Series appearances between the five teams there. So that just goes to show you how dominant the AL East was. And let's not forget, Baltimore was doing pretty good towards the end of the decade as well. So the Blue Jays were kind of just there. And obviously that ends the 2000s for them. They did not get any pennants. So now we get to the early 2010s, and they began the decade by trading a fan favorite starting pitcher in Roy Halladay to the Philadelphia Phillies. And this will be discussed in our trade breakdown series at some point soon. Don't worry. And basically, a lot of names started to, a lot of bigger names started to make their appearances. So Jose Batista, at this point, breaks the franchise single season record for homers in 2010 with 54 home runs. Now everyone knows Batista, so it was just a very interesting thing. He has an interesting story where he was traded for basically peanuts a few times. So in 2010, the Blue Jays became like just really good power hitters. So seven players on that team hit 20 or more home runs in the season. Now, this of course included Jose Batista, Vernon Wells, and Edwin Encarnacion. So at this point, they're known for power hitters, and this is good and bad because, as you know, power hitters are hot and cold. So you're riding on the bats of power hitters, and that's what a lot of teams are doing today. But you don't necessarily want that to be your base. You need some contact guys, and they didn't have any great ones at this point in time. So prior to 2011, they re-signed Jose Batista to a big contract, and in August of that same year, prospect Brett Lowry would make his debut for the team. So the team would really struggle with numerous injuries in 2012, and prior to 2013, the team decided we need to make some moves. So they did this big trade where they did a few different trades, and we have broken down both of them at this point in the trade breakdown series. If you are interested, check them out. One of them is going to be the Mark Burrell trade, in which they acquired Burrell and Jose Reyes from Miami in exchange for a ton of prospects, basically salary dump for the Marlins. And the other one is when they acquired R.A. Dickey from the Mets. This is another one. This one kind of hurt the team in the long run because they ended up losing, Noah Syndergaard, pretty good player, but they also ended up signing an outfielder in Melky Cabrera. So this team knows its window's closing, its players are getting older. They want to compete now. So they acquire some good players to help out, pair of pitchers that are dominant, you know. So Jose Reyes, who's a good contact hitter, and Melky Cabrera, who's a good contact hitter. And the team again in 2013 suffers with injuries. So the team just can't stay healthy. And they would make some more moves before the 2015 season, which saw them basically sign Russell Martin, the catcher, and trade for a bunch of players, including starting pitcher Marco Estrada, third baseman Josh Donaldson, and just a couple other minor players. And they would end up flipping Jose Reyes for Troy Tulowitzki in the hopes that Tulowitzki would do better than Reyes. And they would end up acquiring starting pitcher David Price from Detroit. So this team's really putting all their money in. They're ready to play. They want to compete. They know their window's closing. And they make it to the ALCS in 2015. But they would lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. And this series is known, or this playoff run for the Blue Jays is known for when Jose Batista did his backflip against the Texas Rangers. That started a whole rivalry between the Blue Jays and Rangers, one of the most random ones that you could think of, despite the fact that both had ties to Washington at some point or another. And it goes to show you, this started a big time brawl at some points, and it just upset a lot of people. So then we have May 15th, 2016, when the Blue Jays and Rangers got in a big fight. Of course, we saw Batista gets on second base, says something to Brocknet Odor, and Odor just sucker punches him. And trust me, that was an interesting fight. You see his glasses flying off. And what ends up happening at the trade deadline 2016 is they would acquire Melvin Upton Jr., and they make the ALCS yet again, but this time they would lose to Cleveland. So before 2017, the team would sign Kendrys Morales, but they would lose a bunch of key players, and Encarnacion walked, Melvin Upton walked. So before 2018, they would acquire Curtis Granderson via free agency. But the team was at this point in a downward spiral, and they would end up trading away closer Roberto Osuna to Houston for Ken Giles. And at this point, Osuna was actually suspended for sexual assault claims. So he wasn't doing anything for them anyway. Osuna is definitely a better pitcher than Giles, but it just goes to show you. And they would end up trading away Josh Donaldson in August at the non-waiver trade deadline, or the waiver trade deadline, I should say. And this was a very controversial move because basically the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Astros were saying, hey, we're competitive. Why are you letting this team trade this player to this team? Because you traded them Cleveland when Cleveland's one of our best competitors. And they immediately placed Donaldson on the DL, which you're not supposed to do if you acquire a guy at the waiver trade deadline. So it was a controversial move, but 2019 saw some hope for the young kids in Toronto, as the team would call up Vladimir Guerrero Jr., third baseman slash first baseman now, second baseman Kevin Biggio, and shortstop Bo Bichette. So at this point, the team's young, talented, and ready to compete. And the team did not win any AL pennants in the 2010s. Now, of course, the 2020 season, at this point in time, it's not officially over, but as of yesterday, the Blue Jays did clinch a playoff spot in the 2020 MLB playoffs. Time will tell what happens with them in 2020. I don't know if they have enough talent to make the Cup run this year or the World Series run this year. It's plausible, but I just don't see it. They have acquired some good pitching, obviously, like Kenta Maeda. They got him. So the team's got some talent, but I think they're another year or two away just because of how young they are, specifically on that infield there. Very streaky guys. So at this point in time, 9 people with ties to the Toronto Blue Jays organization are in Cooperstown. And the team obviously has won 2 AL pennants and won both trips to the World Series for a very respectable 100 win percentage in the World Series. Those two World Series were, of course, 92 and 93. And the team has 3 retired numbers. Now, one of them is the always retired, respectable number 42, Jackie Robinson. The other two are Roberto Alomar, number 12, and the man, the legend, number 32, Roy Halladay. But like I said, it was a quicker trade breakdown, or sorry, a quicker video, history of video. That was the Toronto Blue Jays. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe. We're going to be doing this trade. We're going to be doing the history of series again. I have more scripts ready to go. I will probably end up trying to do the Rays very soon. Hopefully Monday we'll do the Rays history. Other than that, I still have to do some work on the Yankees one in particular. Yankees one's going to be pushed back. I'm not gonna. I'm trying to go, division by division. Yankees one, I'm not gonna be able to do that. I have to do the whole script again. It's just a complete mess. But again, hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great rest of your day. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. I will respond to your comments. Have a great day. Sarah, heading out.